Why isn't Tony Garea in the WWE Hall of Fame? 5-time tag team champion, road agent for decades.
Okay, I don't know. You don't see Tony Garea do any of the fan fest. He lives, I think he probably still lives in the same house that he was living in the 90s, which I think was the same house that he had been living in for like 20 years when he moved up there. And Tony Garea and Dean Ho, right? In fucking 1974 were the tag team champions. He was the fiery New Zealand babyface. I think he moved in there and just stayed. And he did at the time that I went up in 93, he had already, retired from the ring, but was one of the agents. I'd be lying. I didn't have that much problem with Tony, but Tony, he was very dry. He could be dickish to the underneath guys. He'd kind of lift the eyebrow a little bit. He didn't go out of his way to really bust his ass to help anybody. Except if it was somebody he was naturally in favor of. But he was never really, he wasn't the top agent either. He wasn't a Jack Lanza. He wasn't a Pat Patterson. He was more like, if there was two towns, Dave Hebner would be in one and check it up at the box office, and they might ask Tony to do the other stuff or take care of the underneath guys or the job guys payoffs or whatever. So, I haven't seen him or heard of him back at WWE events in years. I don't know whether there was a acrimonious departure or if he just decided to retire and don't give a fuck, but you don't see him around any of the fan fests or reunions either, do you?
Well, you do a little bit lately. I think you did CNC.
Well, they go for the guests that you don't normally get. So exactly. There you go.
In terms of the agents that were there when you were there, who was hated by the wrestlers the most? You had Chief Jay Strongbow, Rene Goulet, Tony Garea, Jack Lanza. Was George Animal Steel an agent at that time, or was that after?
Yes. No. The guys loved George Steele. I loved George Steele. We used to ride together sometimes. Jack Lanza was a fucking treat. Loved him. Pat was always great to work with, and he obviously, because of his tenure and how long he'd been on creative and or the top agent, he was Vince's right-hand guy. And Strongbow was just so full of shit. He was he sat around a big fat tub, just so full of shit. And he would book the job guys there at first, I think probably late 80s, early 90s. That's how the Hardys were there when they were underage, because they went with the Italian Stallion. He'd get somebody in each area that had guys they could pile in the car, and he'd take part of the fucking money and, blah, blah, blah. Or he'd always just sit around and take the piss out of everybody and everything and like that. And the classic stereotype of the old timer that doesn't particularly like anything. But because of his importance to Vince Sr. and in the 70s, he was hot there. Holy fucking hell. I've seen the footage. I don't know how they managed to get fucking Chief Jay Strongbow over at that age, and he wasn't even a real fucking Indian. And it was so fucking hokey. But anyway, Strongbow was just, he wasn't on everybody's hit parade as far as people you'd like to hang out with for fun.
What about Rene Goulet?
Sarge was fun. Sarge, I loved it because I'd grown up, he and Don Fargo were the Legionnaires in Sergeant Jacques Goulet in Indianapolis in 1975. I saw them live with Bruiser and Crusher. So 20 years later, I'm working with Sergeant Jacques. I couldn't call him Rene at first. I was like, oh, but no, he was a nice, and he was another one of the underneath agents. And that's not saying, but he would switch back and forth between having underneath matches at TV, or sometimes he'd be checking up at the box office at house shows or whatever. He wasn't, the top agents really were George Steele, Jack Lanza, and obviously Pat transcended that at that era.
When a lot of fans hear the term agent for wrestling, they think of some of the guys that, let's say, recently left WWE, like Arn Anderson, Dean Malenko, guys who work over the matches with the guys before they go out there. What actually are the responsibilities and the job responsibilities of an agent?
Well, and see, once again, if you're talking about the 80s and 90s version, I mean, we didn't even have agents in the NWA for Crockett, or then when TBS bought the company, it was Dusty the booker and JJ the assistant, or the booking committee, anybody on creative, whatever. But agents became popular in the WWF because of the extra money that they spent on television and television production, and it meant more, etc. So basically, the agents then at house shows, you'd have one or two agents for the whole night. And like if it was Dave Hebner and Jack Lanza would handle all the matches, and Hebner would check up at the box office and work with the building. Because then you were going up, especially on a house show, you were going up to Jim and Brian. You got 20 minutes. They just played the angle on TV that y'all did here locally last week or whatever. So it's hot, boom, boom, boom. Jim, you go over. Fuck him some kind of way. Because all the guys were fucking professionals. They knew what they were doing. You didn't need to sit and talk through a match with a guy. For television, even back then, by the early 90s, you had the agents were veteran wrestlers that had been loyal to and worked with in money drawing spots, Vince Sr. or Vince Jr. in some capacity, that understood the business and also had been there long enough to understood how the television worked, because you still had experienced guys. Jack Lanza could go to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Well, maybe that's a bad example. Jack Lanza could go to Mick Foley and The Undertaker and say, okay, you guys, you're on TV or on pay-per-view or whatever. You got 20 minutes. How do we want to go about this? And they would talk about their match, and the agent would sit with them. And he would suggest things, but it's not like you didn't have to put a match together for Mick Foley and The Undertaker. They would ask him, hey, might we, fucking anally impale each other with metal spikes? Nah, Vince probably ain't going to go for that. But if it was something they could sell him on, then he could go sell to Vince, hey, they want to do this. Is it okay? And also a lot of times with the younger guys, the agents would help them remember to work television, where the cameras are, what they're doing on their entrance, how long they've got. When we give you the cue to go home, this is your finish. Do you need 3 minutes for it, or you need 4? And stuff like that, because the agent, especially in modern day in a big company where guys are still, fairly experienced, but, sometimes still younger, they help work now with the production truck. They're the bridge between the production truck and the wrestling in the ring. If something's going to happen that, would surprise, then shock the shit out of most normal TV directors, a guy's suddenly going to be shot out of a fucking cannon, or he's going to fly backwards out of the fucking ring, we'd like to see it on television. The director's going to need to know that. Well, that's the agent's job. It's something that needs to be covered on television in the match. The agent hears it, and then he goes and sits in the truck or deals with the producer and the director and making sure that they don't miss it, because that happened a lot in the 80s before there was a position like that. Because the fucking directors a lot of time weren't smart, and even if they were, they don't know what, this guy's running across the ring and suddenly he fucking falls over the top rope because the other guy pulled it down. We didn't even see that guy. That was the idea. It was supposed to be a surprise, but not to the fucking TV director. So gradually that position has become more important, but not even more important, but more detailed. Back then it was, the agent had, the finishes, who goes over and make sure they don't do anything to get us sued. And now there's a lot more detail involved. That's why there's always somebody with a lot of experience in that position.
The agents would handle the draws, right? The advance money for the wrestlers?
Well, whoever was handling the box office, whichever agent was at the box office, would handle the draws. So, and once again, now people say, because I never saw anybody take a draw in Memphis. It happened every once in a while when one of the top guys said, hey, I need some cash. But when I went to Louisiana, it was written on the bottom of the booking sheet, no draws unless approved by office. And I was like, what the fuck is a draw? I've never even been offered one. But when you were on the road and you needed cash, they would give you a draw, some amount of money against your payoff for the night. So let's say you were in Baton Rouge and you need to draw, they gave you $50. And if your pay was going to be $200 when you got your check, it was 200 minus 50, 150. Well, the WWF, the guys, I normally never took draws. I always brought cash with me on them because if you take draws, then your check is smaller and you lose track of it. A lot of guys drawed themselves into fucking, they put the draws over finally in the end. They did enough draws, they were doing the job.
It's a great way of putting it.
Yes, but anyway, but in the WWE, because or F in those days, the guys had been for 10 years, had been used to being on the road constantly and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. So it was just an automatic thing. They came up and tried to give me draws. I was like, I don't need one. What? I was the only one that wasn't taking one. What the fuck? You turned down a draw? We don't understand. So I'll give me the goddamn thing. But whereas before in territories, when I got into business, if you really were, you didn't like to do it, and it wasn't really a thing that most offices encouraged. Hence why I'd never seen anybody do it in Memphis. And once again, you had to get office approval to do it in Louisiana. But some places, like it was automatic because they were on the road a lot and everybody was making a lot of money. But whoever was handling the box office would then bring the cash back and write down on that you'd sign for your draw.
Throughout your career, how many places paid weekly or bi-weekly or monthly?
Well, monthly. Fuck. I don't know if any wrestler that would have stuck around that long waiting for a fucking check. Memphis paid weekly. And so did, as far as the Southern territories that ran weekly usually paid weekly. As even when they got bigger, like Jim Crockett Promotions still paid weekly. Even when he got to be bigger shows instead of the old weekly circuit. But Watts paid weekly in Mid-South, but he paid weekly the week before last week. He held back a week on you because if you left owing the standard hotels in the territory like the Alamo Plaza in Shreveport, although actually they should have paid us for staying there. Fuck. But the Alamo Plaza in Shreveport or the Sheraton in Tulsa or one of the hotels, if you owed them money or if you left town owing some kind of bill or whatever the fuck, or having not done business the right way, he could rectify it on your last check and he would mail you the balance. But so if you worked the 1st through the 7th, you didn't get paid for that until the 15th. And that way he always had the last word on you. So you also didn't want to leave with no notice because then you wouldn't get your fucking money because then you'd be fined for unprofessional conduct. If you gave notice, he'd always send that check. But most territories, then TBS, when they bought Crockett, began paying every 2 weeks. But, by then it was for most of the guys, it was on a guaranteed contract payment. So that's the first thing that took the fun out of wrestling for me, to be quite honest. And I know a lot of people say, oh my God, when it went from we're paying you on payoffs to we're paying you a guaranteed amount every week and you'll know exactly what you're going to get, it hurt me deep inside and took the fun out of it for me. Now, possibly because the amount that I was getting paid as a guarantee was less than I'd made on several instances in the past on payoffs. But when all of a sudden your fucking normal check went from $2,000 for that week to $4,200 in Louisiana or $4,600, or you got that $10,000 Starcade check, or what you saw when you were in the main event on a fucking show that sold out and you saw that pop, that was fun. But a TBS combination of not doing any fucking appreciable business whatsoever at the house shows and just paying the flat money. I mean, we wouldn't have made that much money on the house shows then. Good Lord, no. But that's another thing they took the fun out of in the business for me. I liked when we were doing business and we popped it even further to get compensated for it and see that, oh, what's check going to be this week? Oh, If I was just a money-grubbing little shit, wasn't I?
How did WWE pay?
Well, goddamn, let's see. Because remember, at first, from 93 through 96, or 93 through 95, I was just, they paid me per appearance for the TVs and the pay-per-views, and I didn't make house shows. And then I'm trying to, when I wasn't an employee, which they paid every 2 weeks, but as I recall, yeah, they paid every week. The talent, or maybe, was it every week? I think it was.
Well, when you're coming in and you're working just TVs and then going back to Smoky Mountain, do they pay you the day of? Do they give you a check, or you get something in the mail?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, that's when they started foisting the draws off on me.
Ah.
But no, then also, no, you would get your check later on in the mail. It wasn't that fly by night yet.
What we commonly refer to as the gorilla position. When was the first time you heard it referred to as the gorilla position outside of WWE?
I swear to Christ, I had written this down because somebody emailed this to me also. Did the NWA have a gorilla position? No, it wouldn't have, because it wouldn't have made any fucking sense, because Gorilla Monsoon never wrestled in the NWA. Here's, once again, in probably the 80s, when the WWF started spending a lot of money on television production, the gorilla position originally was, imagine the WWF Superstars entrance, the curtain, even before they had a stage. They always had a curtain and the light up area, right? As soon as they started having that curtain and that entrance that all the guys came out of on their televisions, on their television tapings, they put right behind the curtain a lunchroom table, 6 or 8 foot lunchroom table with a couple monitors and a couple of headsets, where Gorilla Monsoon and another referee or Bruce Pritchard or whoever happened to be there that they wanted to put in that position would sit, and they could talk to the truck. Vince, that's where Vince loved to hang out. And a lot of times he wouldn't even sit. He'd just stand behind. But that's where the production truck is able to talk to somebody on the ground to tell the wrestlers right there moments before they go out what the fuck's going on, or vice versa, and give time cues and just facilitate in the flow of the program. The NWA had Crockett Promotions didn't really have a position per se, because they shot in so many different arenas and buildings, whether it was Greensboro and it was a big show, and there would be a monitor, obviously, before the behind where you would go out the entrance. But Dusty usually would have a headset in his locker room, and then everybody else would be in the truck. It wasn't as big of a production. And the little small high school gyms, or in Spartanburg, you literally, when you walked out of the locker room, you were walking through the curtain. So there was a monitor in between the 2 small locker rooms they had in this 6 by 6 foot room. And that's the last thing you saw before you went out. So there wasn't even room for a person to sit there. But Gorilla Monsoon started at and popularized that position. So it was known in the WWF as the gorilla position. And even when TBS took over and started doing, more television style television productions, yes, there was a place where guys would go out and a monitor, but it was never had an official name. And because there'd been there was a variety of different people sitting there. So when I went to the WWF first time in 93, it may have been Bruce Pritchard once again, or whoever said to me, well, you be at Gorilla. And I'm like, what? At the gorilla position. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, we call it the gorilla position because that's where Gorilla always sat. I don't even think Gorilla was still there at that point. In the company, yes, but I don't think Gorilla was still the one at the gorilla position by the time that I learned that it was called the gorilla position. He was the WWF president and doing blah, blah, blah. So no, and actually it's in his honor, I guess, when you think about it, that every wrestling promotion now calls the area at their monitor right before you go through the curtain or the entranceway or whatever configuration it is, the gorilla position. But how many do you think actually know Why the fuck? Because when you think about it on the surface of it, it's called the gorilla position. If you don't know it's because of Gorilla Monsoon, those words have no fucking meaning whatsoever. Like what? The position that gorillas fuck in?
The word position is what was always funny to me there.
Well, yeah, well, and it's another one of fucking Vince things. You know, it's I'm surprised it's not the gorilla facility. Or, you know, or the gorilla championship title or what, you know, whatever the fuck. That's something Vince would say. Well, you be standing by at the gorilla position. He plans everything like it's fucking Invasion of Normandy. But when these outlaw groups call their spot the gorilla position and have absolutely no idea who it's named for or why it's called the gorilla position, I wonder then, do they ever think, why the fuck am I saying these nonsense words to describe a fucking holding area?